on the question of people coming to agreement, perhaps your monologue today is going to get at something that people can come to agreement on.
There we go.
What's your point today, Ryan?
Ending this war in Yemen. So we can report today that Senator Bernie Sanders is planning to force a vote on a war powers resolution aimed at blocking U.S. support for the Saudi-led war in Yemen as soon as next week, he told my colleague at The Intercept, Dan Boguslaw. An agreement for a ceasefire in Yemen between the Saudi-led alliance and the Houthis, who are backed by Iran, expired October 1st, though both sides have tenuously maintained that peace. Now, backers of a war powers resolution say that a strong vote in the Senate in the lame duck will send a signal to Saudi Arabia that it does not have a free hand to restart hostilities, despite the Biden administration's more placating posture amid its hunt for lower oil prices. Anti-war advocates had become a bit frustrated that Sanders had until today not announced if and when he'd be moving forward with the vote, though it's fair to say that Sanders has been heavily occupied. He led the fight last week against forcing a contract on rail workers that they had democratically rejected, and he worked with House allies unsuccessfully to add 7 sick days to it. He's also fighting the effort to add Senator Joe Manchin's energy permitting reform to the National Defense Authorization Act. Now, a vote would not take significant floor time, though, and anti-war advocates have been pushing him hard privately to move ahead with the vote. The news that he's finally doing so will surely hearten those who've been pressuring him. Now, a war powers resolution is, quote, privileged in the Senate, which means that the sponsor of it can bring it to the floor for a vote without the need for approval by the chamber's leadership once a certain amount of time has elapsed. At that point, the resolution has what we call ripened, and the one sponsored by Sanders is now ripe, meaning it can come to the floor. On Wednesday, a coalition of groups pushing to end the war in Yemen planned to release a letter to Congress calling for a war powers resolution vote during the lame duck. And today, the House Foreign Affairs Committee holds a hearing on the issue. The House version of the war powers resolution is sponsored by outgoing Representative Peter DeFazio, and it needs the support of Representative Jim McGovern to get through the House Rules Committee. It's much easier to move the House version once the Senate version passes, if it does. The war between Russia and Ukraine, though, in which the U.S. has been supporting Ukraine without a declaration of war, may complicate the politics of the resolution because some of the language as applied to Yemen would appear to perhaps equally apply to the war in Ukraine, though, of course, Congress is never under any obligation to be consistent in their interpretation across countries. The resolution defines, quote, hostilities in a number of ways, including, quote, sharing intelligence for the purpose of enabling offensive coalition strikes and providing logistical support for offensive coalition strikes, including by providing maintenance or transferring spare parts to coalition members flying warplanes engaged in anti-Houthi bombings in Yemen, unquote. Now, that definition is legally safe in Ukraine, probably, since there's no evidence the U.S. is helping Ukraine target Russia inside Russia's own borders. Although we might be, it's not known, and there was just a major strike inside Russia's borders. If there's any evidence that the U.S. Participated in that, that could trigger that provision right there. But the second definition reads, quote, the assignment of United States armed forces, including of any civilian or military personnel of the Department of Defense, to command, coordinate, participate in the movement of, or accompany the regular or irregular military forces of the Saudi-led coalition forces in hostilities against the Houthis in Yemen, or in situations in which there exists an imminent threat that such coalition forces become engaged in such hostilities, unless and until the president has obtained specific statutory authorization in accordance with Section 8A of the War Powers Resolution, unquote. Now, as The Intercept has previously reported, the U.S. Special Operations personnel have indeed played an active role in Ukraine under a presidential covert action finding. Despite the ceasefire lapsing in February, though, the Saudis have yet to resume bombing. Anti-war advocates believe that the Saudi hesitation flows from a concern that opponents of the war in Washington would get an upper hand at the first report of civilian casualties from a renewed campaign of bombing in a war that has stretched on for some 7 years now. The Saudis continue to maintain a blockade of Yemen, strangling the country's economy and producing a humanitarian crisis of biblical proportions. And part of this, Emily, feels like...
Hey guys, ready or not, 2024 is fully upon us now, and Sagar and I have been brainstorming ways that we can really up our game for this critical election.
Yeah, we rely on our premium subs to expand our coverage, to add staff, to upgrade the studio. We just want to give you the best independent coverage of this election, which is possible. So if you can help us out, become a premium subscriber today, breakingpoints.com, or the link is down here in the description video. It really means the world to us, and if you like what we're all about, this is the best possible way to keep us 100% independent, working only for you.